How you going there, Max Legends? It's the K-Man here, and this strong I got a great question from one of our Max students, Mighty Merv. We call him Mighty Merv because when you look at him, he's quite mighty, like these Remarkables. He actually makes these Remarkables look like a hill when they're actually a mountain. So, Mighty Merv, how you going there, Mighty, if you're watching? Great guy, lots of experience in weight training, built like the Remarkables behind me, and has a lot of common sense as well. And he actually injured his calf. He strained his calf. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor, his advice for him to go home and rest. Now, a lot of people will take that as go home, sit on the couch, eat potato chips and watch Netflix and do nothing. And many times that is what they mean. Now, the challenge with that, there are many challenges with that from a musculoskeletal point of view, but that didn't sort of fit well with Mighty Merv. He said that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so he decided to run it past me, and he gave me his advice on his solutions, and they were great solutions. He was spot on. And the challenge with going home and you rest if you have an injury, and you'll get that sometimes from a client if you're an exercise professional, or yourself. You get an injury, I've got a sore toe, bad knee, bad elbow, bad neck, so do I go and do nothing or do something? Well, we do know one thing. If you don't use it, you lose it. And that is related to your entire body. So if you do get an injury, how do you address that for yourself, and how do you address that with a client? Well, let's have a look at the common sense behind it. When you get injured, yes, certainly the injury will have inflammation, pain, limited range of movement attached to it. So the first thing you have to do with any injury is to manage the pain and decrease the inflammation and get a bit of range of movement back. Yes, you have to do that. And during that process, you may not be able to use it like you used to use it because the pain would stop you in the inflammation. You don't want to aggravate it or flare it up even more. So yes, there might be a time where that joint needs to be rested. It needs to have ice, it needs to have stretching, elevation, all those things to manage the inflammation, because the joint or the muscles won't regenerate until the inflammation is down, because when there's inflammation, that joint is in a catabolic state. So you're actually going to be losing strength, losing muscle tissue in that state because you're actually eating the joint away to manage the inflammation. However, does that mean that because that joint's losing strength, losing muscle size, losing function, does that mean I do that to the rest of the body in sympathy for that joint? Just because one joint's down, does that mean you have to take all the joints down by doing nothing? Because if you go home and do nothing, well, you're going to be losing strength, muscle size, function, stability, bone mineral density, circulation, capillarization. You're going to lose all of those things, respiratory fitness, cardiovascular fitness. You're going to lose all of those things if you do nothing, because you're going to start going backwards, not just in this joint or whatever joint it might be, but every joint, which means when you actually come out of recovery, then you've got a lot more to regenerate from. You've got a lot of hard work to do, not just to get this joint functioning, but get all the other joints and all the other systems in the body up and going. So the first thing is, what's really important to do is that you don't degenerate everything just because of something. Just because the knee's not functioning doesn't mean I have to take all the function away from the rest of the body. So that's the first thing. Just because one's down doesn't mean you have to take the whole body down, because that would not make any sense, because now you have to deal with atrophy of the whole body, not just the joint that is you've had to recover. Now, when you're actually recovering that particular joint, whatever it might be, you want to make sure that you follow common sense and physiological and anatomical protocol, so when you do lose muscle tissue, you don't lose as much as you could. If you do nothing and completely immobilize the joint, you will lose a lot of muscle, you lose a lot of strength, power, function, stability, all those components. You lose capillarization, you lose circulation. All those things will be deteriorated, because when I say if you don't use it, you lose it, that applies to everything. So during the rehabilitation process, you would ideally be working with a sports physiotherapist or a sports doctor or a sports physician, because a sports doctor or sports physician would never say to you, go home and do complete rest. They would never say that, because they're a sports physician or a sports doctor. It means they use activity and exercise as a way to accelerate recovery and regeneration. If you go to any elite sports team, you never see an athlete doing nothing. Even if they're injured, they'll be on the bike. They'll be doing something to keep them going. Not to mention to keep the mind going. Because if you stop using what you've got, not only does your muscle degenerate, so does your mind and your mindset and your motivation, and all of this and your positivity will all go down the toilet hole. So not just from physiological, but also from a psychological point of view. Now, if you have a bad arm, say it's the right arm, and I've experienced this many times because I'm a mature age athlete in martial arts. I compete in the international stage, and every year it's not if, it's just what joint am I rehabilitating this year. You just point to the joint, I'll name the condition that I had and the year that I had to overcome it and rehabilitate it so I can keep competing. But because I had those injuries, doesn't mean I stopped training. If I couldn't use the left arm or the right arm, I used the right arm and the two legs. If I couldn't use the right knee, I used the left knee and the two arms. If I couldn't use the left arm, then I worked on my right jab. I always kept going. I kept using the whole body, even though I limited use of that particular joint that's in that rehabilitation phase. So yes, you have to address the rehabilitation in an active way, ideally, not in a passive way. So you may have to be passive in the initial inflammation, but then you want to get passive rehabilitation and then loaded. Then you want to go from passive to active rehabilitation, then active to loaded active rehabilitation. But you're only in the passive for that joint for a very short period of time. I've worked with athletes who are in hospital with knee injuries and they've got their dumbbells beside their bed. They can't move anywhere, they're in the hospital, their legs elevated, but they're still working the dumbbells because not only does that work the muscles, but also works the mind and keeps them sane, because I'd go nuts if they didn't use. And you don't want to be losing all your muscle just because of one leg, particularly if you come back and say, now my knee's been atrophied away and everything else has been atrophied away. Let's maintain everything while you rebuild this. The other great thing is that if you start using all the rest of your body when you're rehabilitating a joint or a limb, then you're getting the benefit of exercise of all the healthy muscles and the healthy joints, but there's going to be some transference in performance into the rehabilitating joint. So if I've got a headache or I've got a knee pain, then I take a painkiller, whether it be the headache or the knee. If it's a headache, I get over the headache. If it's a knee, I get over the knee, because that painkiller, that goes into the bloodstream and floats around the entire body and starts to act as an analgesic for any pain, any parts of the body. I don't have a pill for the headache and a pill for the knee and a pill for the arm and a pill for the shoulder. I just have one pill, and it will go through the entire body, through the circulatory system, the blood vessels and the blood, and it will go around and it will be an analgesic to any inflammation or any pain, no matter where it is. My point being is blood goes everywhere. Even if you say, look, you can't just choose where it goes everywhere. So if I use my left shoulder because I've had impingement and tendonitis in the left shoulder, and I start using my legs and using my other arm, then that increase in respiratory system and the increase in cardiovascular, what that does is I'm going to get better blood circulation, not just for the working muscles, but for the muscles that aren't working, because it still has to go through the same canal, still has to go through the same pipes, still has to go through the same blood vessels. It goes everywhere. It doesn't just go here or here, it goes all over. So that increase in blood flow to the rehabilitating joint is going to be positive, because with that increase in blood flow, I'm going to take more oxygen to that muscle, even though it's not working, because that oxygen is going to be beneficial and it's going to maintain capillarization of that muscle, that joint, because without the capillaries opened up and the blood supply, you can't get all the good stuff, whether it be the stuff to decrease the inflammation or to create a regeneration of the joint. So I'm going to get all my macronutrients down there, my fats, my carbohydrates and proteins. I'm going to get all my micronutrients, all my vitamins and minerals will also go to the inactive site as well. And because that site is in that constant process of regeneration, it's going to be using those resources to help regenerate that injury and to recover that injury. And that will actually make it go faster in recovery, because I've got good stuff there, because I'm supplying good stuff not to the working muscles but also to the rehabilitating muscles. Not to take into account is when I'm actually working any of my body, I'm activating the central nervous system. So I keep the neural pathways open, the neuromuscular connections all active. That way, because strength many times is neuromuscular. A lot of the developments in strength is neuromuscular. And if you lose strength, it's because you lose the firing or the motor unit recruitment or the synchronization of activation of the motor units, whatever it might be. So working all the other points, will activate the nervous system. Well, even though you're not moving it, it's still sending messages to it anyway. Plus, when I exercise, I stimulate the endocrine system, or the hormonal system, that releases all the action hormones and the anabolic hormones into the bloodstream, things like such as testosterone and human growth hormone. And they are used not just to build the muscles that I'm building when I'm training, but also to help recover and regenerate the muscles from injury. Because the regeneration is the same as building. It's the same thing, it's just from a lower level. So if I'm actually create a hormonal environment which is very anabolic rather than catabolic, anabolic means I'm releasing my anabolic hormones not just into my working muscles and working joints and working body parts, but they'll also be transported via the non-working part that will create an anabolic environment for my injury to regenerate in a faster rate. So not only do you exercise during rehabilitation, whether it's a calf, then that's all right. Don't use that leg. Use the other leg and use these two limbs. Whatever it is, you can do something. I've had people in athletes in hospital, they can't move their leg, but they're isometric connecting. They're tensing the muscles to keep them active. And as soon as they get a bit of range, they start moving that range, and they work within the pain-free range, and they increase that range. And then that's a passive. Then they make it active, and then they make it active loaded, and then they take active loaded and functional. And before you know it, they rehabilitate themselves in, say, 6 weeks, where someone who goes home and sits on the couch eating potato chips, watching Netflix, who does nothing, it could take him 6 months. And not only would it take 6 months, that's 6 months of degeneration, of muscle loss. We know if you put someone in complete immobilization within 1 week, you can virtually take 5 years of muscle wastage off their body in as little as 1 week from complete immobilization. So do not immobilize, keep mobile. You may need to control one of the limbs in a mobile state, but keep the rest functioning, because that will not only maintain your performance and your strength and your fitness for the rest of the body, but it will also accelerate the recovery and regeneration of that injured site that you're trying to manage. So when it comes to rest, it's what we call active rest. It means you may just need to consider how to maneuver around that injury so you can keep moving forward. There may be a short period of time that obviously injury is that bad after post-surgery or something, then it's completely isolated and you're completely immobilized. But as soon as you can do something, do it. If you just do something, even if it's isometric or just passive movement and then active movement, then loaded active movement, then keep moving forward. Because if you don't keep pushing forward, you'll be pushed right back. And then the further back you go, the harder it will be to get back up and go forward, because you think, wow, I've lost so much ground in that time frame. You don't have to learn that much ground. You don't have to lose that much ground. Just a little ground in some areas, but you can still make ground in other areas. I have quite a great right jab now, because the year that I could barely jab with my left shoulder because of tendonitis and impingement, I worked on my right jab. So my right jab, the skill set has gone right up. When I couldn't kick with my left leg, then I kick with my right leg. So you can always turn a situation into a positive. And in that process, you might be able to turn some of your weaknesses into strengths. So what do I do if I'm injured? Something. Because if you do nothing, you will get nothing. And not only will you get nothing, you go way back. Because if you don't use it, you will certainly lose it.